Chirag, welcome. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, that should be morning there.
Afternoon, I would say.
Afternoon. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice having you back, Chirag. Back to your alma mater.
Hi.
Hi,
Yeah.
Chirag.
Hi. How have you been?
How are you?
I'm good. How is everything?
Everything is fine. I can
Uh,
see long hair.
yeah.
Evolution.
Yeah.
Good. Chirag,
Okay.
we are supposed to start at 5:30, maybe at 2 minutes. We'll give
Yeah.
an extra
Sure.
time for participants and then start. We are also live streaming it on YouTube. So there are also
Okay.
participants there.
Yeah.
We have a speaker for the day also. Aditya, welcome.
Hello,
And it should
sir.
be good morning there.
Yeah, it's
Hi,
morning.
Aditya.
Hello, how are you?
How are you, man? Aditya.
Good, good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
you're
hear.
audible.
Okay, okay.
Okay, I think we'll start. Let people join because he said 5:30. Thomas, sir, shall we proceed?
Yeah, yeah. Another
Okay.
2 minutes?
2. Okay, 5:32. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Thomas, sir, it's 32. We'll start off.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Anukriti, over to you.
Yes, sir. A warm greetings to all the participants and welcome to the second session of International Webinar on Studying Abroad and Career Prospects for Life Science Students. This is the fourth in line webinar organized by National Science Association, St. Joseph's College, in association with Placement Office, St. Joseph's College, in the interest of youngsters willing to pursue their career abroad as well as in India. Before we begin the seminar, there are some general guidelines that we want you to abide by. Participants are requested to switch off their mics throughout the course of the webinar so as to avoid any background or static noise. Participants are also informed that unlike our morning session that was held for an hour, this session will only be for half an hour each and 10 minutes are allotted for discussion. In case your questions or doubts go unanswered, you can get in touch with our respective resource person as we'll share their email ID. Participants streaming this webinar from YouTube are requested to enter their name and the name of their institution and stay present throughout the course of the webinar to be eligible for the certificates. Participants using MS Teams can unmute themselves during the question and answer session and ask your questions. Participants streaming this event from YouTube are also requested to type in their questions, which will be conveyed to our resource person during the respective Q&A session. I will now welcome Professor Thomas B. Zakaria, Head of Zoology Department, St. Joseph's College, to give the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay. On behalf of the management of St. Joseph's College Autonomous, our rector, Father Phd Silva SJ, Principal Reverend Father Victor Lobo SJ, Placement Officer Professor Kiran Jeevan, Dr. Jayashankar M, Coordinator of the NSA, my colleagues of Zoology Department, I welcome the resource persons, our own students, Mr. Chirag Rajendra Chitta, University of Amsterdam, Netherlands, Mr. Aditya Srinivas, Tutor, Sutherland Campus, Canada, Mr. Nitin R, PhD Scholar, University of South Carolina, USA, to the second session of the international webinar on studying abroad and career prospects for life science students. Also welcome all the participants and volunteers. I am sure this webinar will throw open the opportunities available for students of life sciences. Once again, I welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll now request Jennifer to introduce our first speaker for the evening.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jennifer Roslin from 3rd CZBT. On behalf of St. Joseph's College Autonomous Zoology Department and the Natural Sciences Association, I take this opportunity to gladly introduce the first speaker of the evening session, Mr. Chirag Rajendra Chittar. Mr. Chirag is presently working on his thesis, The Evolution of Chromosomal Organization in the RNA World, and plans to pursue a PhD. Mr. Chirag is a meritorious student, topping in zoology and English during his study in SJC as an undergraduate student. He is an avid school and intercollegiate levels. Chirag has involved himself in an admirable hobby of bird watching for 15 years now. He has extensive experience in his field of study as he has worked under various dedicated PhD students and has helped them successfully complete their research. He was also a part of water birth survey in Bangalore that took an account of the number of water births present across 200 lakes, tanks and streams in all of Bangalore in January 2016. His enthusiasm and perseverance in his intellectual growth is acknowledged and valued. I heartily welcome Mr. Chirag to deliver his talk on the topic Life After Bachelor's, Applying for Universities and Career Prospects. Hearty welcome to you, sir. Over to you now.
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot for the warm introduction. I decided to plan a very kind of informal talk on how it is like to apply abroad and like to actually live here. And hopefully I can finish my talk a bit earlier so that I can like spend some more time during the question and answer session and like talk to you guys. Let's just see. About me, I graduated from St. Joseph's in from 2014 and graduated in 2017, and I majored in chemistry, botany, zoology. And after that, I basically took a year off and worked in NCBS on a project in Mahesh Shankaran's lab, and we looked at the effect of seed mass on germination and imbibition in savanna natives. So yeah, I'm currently doing my thesis in University of Amsterdam in the ecology and evolution track. First, I will tell you about my master's course. So I'm basically doing a 2 years course, which is for 120 credits. So the first year is 60 and the next year is 60. It comprises of 2 compulsory courses and 3 electives in the first year. Each of these courses lasts a month. That's how it is in the Netherlands. So you basically have a particular subject throughout a month, and then within the month you have assignments and examinations and everything. It can be a bit intense, but it is very hands-on and it is very focused and also fun. After this, I had to do 2 projects and a literature review. This is the most conventional path that you can take, but yeah, you can also take other paths which I will talk to you in a bit. So this is the research path. And my first project I did was an anthropological project, which was I looked at the different roles of music in a hunter-gatherer society, and I basically look for an explanation for the origins of music. So it was slightly different from my course that I did, but since my supervisor is an ecologist as well, and a behavioral biologist, we could still kind of make it work. So then you in your second year, it is pretty flexible. Actually, you can either do like a second project and a literature review, or you can also do like a major track. So you can take three majors, and three majors. One of the majors is teaching, where you get like training to teach for Dutch schools and colleges. And then you have a science communication track where you learn aspects such as communicating science with the public, then policy making, and all of that. And then you have a science and society, which is again more broad than science communication. But yeah, if you are really interested in it, you can always check this at the University of Amsterdam website. And then you can also do a minor course, and a minor course and a project. So it's a mix of both. And the minor course is for 30 credits, and the project is for 30 credits. And the minor is an interdisciplinary course where you can do an internship in physics, or yeah, like a kind of cross field study or something like that. And then more about the course. So the course is in collaboration with Vrije University Amsterdam. It's another university in the south of Amsterdam. And that means the good part is that you are basically a student of both universities. You can like take courses in both the universities, and that's a really good advantage because you get to know more researchers. You get to take like variety of classes, and also meet different students. So yeah, that means you're eligible for classes and project. And the project here is that you can do it anywhere in the Netherlands. So, for example, my thesis currently I'm not doing in the University of Amsterdam. I'm doing it in Leiden University, which is another city in south of Holland. And my thesis will be evaluated by both my Leiden University supervisor and my professor in Amsterdam. So I need an external, but you can always do another project elsewhere. That's one of the best things I think of doing a project in the Netherlands, because it's also a really small country. Apart from that, you can also do your research abroad if you do have the funding, or if you do get a grant. But yeah, for Indian students, it can be a bit more difficult because we are already in the Netherlands on a visa. So we might need another visa. So it's a bit complicated, but it's still possible. And then you have emphasis on, so the courses, the best part about the courses is that you have a lot of emphasis on practical stuff like lab work, programming, and teaching you tools that are actually useful. And including, like, you have a compulsory course on statistics, which is really important. So it is a very hands-on course. It's not just theoretical work. And then you also have a compulsory paper discussion. It's known as masterclass, where you can also read paper from a particular speaker that's invited, or mostly a scientist. And then you get to ask the scientist questions related to the paper that you have read, and you can converse with the scientist. And this is like extremely fun. I think we have had like some really fun sessions, and it's very vast. Some scientists come from a genetics background, and some are from a community ecology background. So it's very vast. And then you have a lot of paper reading, and you're expected to know the basics. So nobody's really going to spoon feed you. You should kind of know what, in my case, what ecology evolution is, or yeah, if you're doing molecular biology, you're kind of expected to know the basics. So the assessment depends on the course. So some courses have exams and there are others that don't have exams, but usually it's a mix of exams and assignments. And after that, you have a science writing course, which is compulsory, where they teach you how to write papers and like the correct usage of English and yeah, stuff like that. So how did I apply? So during my gap year, I did my all my options, and then I had also written an the NCBS wildlife exam, which happens every 2 years, and I had cleared it. That was my backup. And apart from that, I had applied to. So I cleared the exam, and I was basically eligible for the interviews. And then I had applied to the two Erasmus programs, one on ecology called Meme. You can write it down if you want. So Erasmus is program which is eligible for like the entire Europe. So you get to go to from one university to the another based on the semester. So one semester you can study in a different university, and then you get to go elsewhere. And then is called Tropi Mundo, and I got shortlisted for evolution, but did not get into the course. And then I'm monitored and read about different courses on ecology and evolution through different universities. I checked which was the best for me in terms of what I wanted to do, and that is really important. So you do have to read what the researchers are doing, what is a university known for, etc. And then just for like making things easier, I would also look at the rankings and at a broad level, how is the publication percentage, like do they publish papers in like good journals or not, the researchers there. So that for that I use Time Higher Education and QS. And then I made a provisional list and started applying in November for the fall year in the succeeding year. And then I had to make a list of scholarships, and I applied one by one to the scholarships. So there were scholarships from the Indian organizations like the Ravi Shankaran Fellowship and Commonwealth Fellowship and Tata Endowment, but there's also the scholarships from the universities. But for many of them, you don't really have to apply in the Netherlands; they just apply it for you. And then applying to several universities in UK, Netherlands, Finland, Belgium, Germany. So what did I learn in terms of application related? So I got admission into most of the universities that I applied to, but getting scholarship is difficult. In Germany, it is relatively easier, but yeah, it completely depends on the course as well. So certain courses maybe scholarship is easier and certain it's not. And then scholarship is not, one thing you have to remember is that it does not always matter how good you score. In your BSc, it is also a factor of luck in the sense that if the university has enough money, or now you have the COVID situation, so scholarships are already kind of difficult right now. So so it's a bit of luck, and it's also a bit of like if you have represented the nation in like sports or extracurricular activities and or something like that, when in sometimes that can get a lot of merit. Then each university has a slightly different process for application and requirements, though generalities can be similar. Like SOP and LO are most universities will ask, but there will be variations within that. Let's say the number of words, or like some might request you to give a certain document that another university may not give. Some might just want you to give e-document, some might want both the documents to be posted and the documents to be given online. And then eligibility for universities can differ. So in some universities, even in Germany, actually, 3 years bachelor's may not be applicable. So you might think that, it's the case only in the US, but no, it it is a kind of a thing in in Germany and some places in Switzerland as well. Whereas in the Netherlands, all the universities accept 3 years bachelor's. And then yeah, the tenure of master differs. In UK, it's 1 year full-time masters. You can ask for 2 year part-time, but it depends on the university, and not all universities could give that. Then language requirements are completely necessary. You have to write an English exam. Some universities also ask for a GRE, but from my knowledge, no university in the Netherlands really asks for GRE. They'll just ask you IELTS or TOEFL, which are the English proof exams. And it requires a lot of planning. Like, you have to understand that it is a big decision, and you have to evaluate all your options and like look at them one by one, and not just make a hasty decision. But yeah, it is completely worth it, at least my courses, because you do learn a lot, and a lot of it like you wouldn't have learned in Indian universities. I can, if you have more questions, I can always answer. And then applying early is always helpful. uh, so what did I learn in terms of living in the Netherlands and in terms of the course? So the master's program is perfect if you are your own boss. That means if you are incredibly independent, and if you like doing stuff on your own, and if you don't like spoon feeding at all. So I think I am like that. I don't really want my supervisors to micromanage me. I would like to work it on my own, figure things many times on my own, and but they will help you. If you do ask them, they will help you. At least in my case, I have got really good guidance and help. But they do encourage for you to think on your own. Here, there is no real hierarchy as such. So supervisors will ask you your opinion, and then they will want you to know what you think. And if you really like that, then it's a good idea to apply. Then you have lots of exposure. So exposure in terms of the culture, in terms of how science actually works, like how do you collaborate with different researchers, how do you talk to people if you want to make like a combined study, or making new friends, for example, and learning more about their backgrounds and so on and so forth. And one more interesting thing about the Netherlands is there is no strict deadline, at least for my projects. You can submit it like whenever you can, but yeah, you have to understand that it isn't as easy as it sounds. You can, like, you still have to plan your masters and everything, and yeah, you shouldn't take it lightly. Even if you don't have a strict deadline, it's really important to plan how your project is. And to be honest, I think this is the challenge. This is where a lot of people struggle. So one more important thing is that people value work and life balance. So you will find that people will, if they work from 9 to 5, they will work from 9 to 5. But on weekends they won't really do much. They would just go outside, or take a break or something. But when they do work, they really do work. So it's very consistent. And here, yeah, they do respect your privacy and your necessity to kind of, if you want to relax on a weekend, it's respected. So a course can be intense and demanding at times, but it is really enjoyable. Then language, in terms of communication, it's not a really big issue in the Netherlands, especially in Amsterdam. Most people speak English, and you don't really have to learn Dutch in order to get into the Netherlands. But if you want to get citizenship in the future, then yeah, Dutch is compulsory and you have to write the exam. But in other countries like Germany and France, they could be a bit more strict in terms of the language. So you might need German or French in some cases. So living here is expensive. That means, yeah, food and everything is expensive. So it is really important to plan and buy groceries and kind of rely on yourself. Nobody is really going to do anything for you. You have to just do everything for yourself, including laundry or food, cooking, or everything. So but it makes you independent, which is nice. Then public transport is quite expensive, but it's really efficient. You can go to any nook and corner of the country, and discounts are also possible. You can buy like certain cards or certain subscriptions for the train and so on and so forth. But I would advise you to cycle if you do know how to cycle. And then the most important part is, yeah, spoon feeding is absent, even in not only in the university, but even outside. If you have questions regarding to, if you need even something from a friend or someone you need to ask, people won't just come and ask you, Do you want this? Do you want that?" You have to go and ask and yeah, request sufficient information. So the general advice for a course and living in the Netherlands, so finances, scholarship, you have few government and there are some through the university. It's difficult, and most students in the Netherlands don't have a scholarship, which is different from Germany. Then the most important part here is the part-time job or student assistantship. Please request your supervisors if they have a job where they can work as a research assistant, or if they can teach. So it is more probable, because I did the second thing. I also worked part time for a bit. I worked, yeah, it was like a job in a hotel. And then I also taught in university for a bit. So then the third part is either taking education loans or from your parents. Then housing, you have to understand that there are no hostels in the Netherlands and in general in Europe, but student housing is organized by different boards. So yeah, you can check the websites that I mentioned here. I can also send this presentation when I'm done. And then yeah, Facebook groups like Amsterdam Apartments or Rent or Find Roommate in Amsterdam, websites. um and then insurance, your Indian in health insurance won't be valid, so you need to get a compulsory Dutch health insurance. Provisions like rent allowance and insurance allowance depending on the house and insurance. Have a discuss So the general advice for application is, have a discussion with your family, talk about everything, talk about different options you have. Keep in students with all your seniors and people who have been through the same process. Ask them everything in terms of, yeah, like how to, like what to do about the groceries, even like simple things like that. Apply way in advance to get a feel of things. So once you finish an application, and if you want to apply to more universities, it always helps to like do it once, and then it's easier the next time. So please apply in advance, and then read information and websites fully, and don't hesitate to ask questions and sending mails to universities and university student desks. Then work on your SOP and CV. Universities value how much work you have done and not just academics. So you would have to do internships and things like that. And also if you're clear in terms of what you want to do and what research ideas you have, it's always a bonus. And then see what works for you and how many places you need to apply. It differs for each person. And if the language course is necessary, do a language course, and please read a bit about the country or the city that you're going to beforehand, so that you aren't overwhelmed when you come here. And then check the percentage of international students while looking at universities. This is really important, because usually international students percentage is an indicator of whether the courses are taught in English or not. And in general, it also helps so that you aren't isolated or you don't feel lonely or anything like that. So a percentage for international students you should always check. And then weigh expenses along with the value of the course. See if the course is really worth it. If the course requires you to pay a lot of money, see if the course is really worth the amount of money and time or not. So that's it. Thank you. Yeah, I can answer your questions if you have time.
Yeah, that's exactly on time. Thank you, Chirag. Uh, Rebecca, any questions from the YouTube? Anukriti also can coordinate.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead.
There's no questions as of now, sir, on YouTube.
Okay. Participants here on the MS team, if you have any question to ask, you can unmute yourself and proceed asking.
Um, Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Misbah from CEZ. I'd like to ask that, as you mentioned, the 3-year BSc program might not be valid in most universities. So, how do we compensate for that?
So in Europe, it's so what I said was in certain universities in Europe, it may not be eligible, but it is very few. For example, I think LMU in Munich, there it's not eligible, or Zurich in Switzerland, it's not eligible. But yeah, so the way to compensate for that is, I think, doing a master's in India, and then again, yeah, applying for it, completing your master's, and then again applying for one more master's if you're really interested. But in Europe, generally, in the Netherlands, it is eligible. You can apply anywhere with 3-year bachelor course here.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Srijan from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. Can you please give some idea about how to apply for PhD programs in Netherlands?
So the way PhD programs work is that you first have to check the vacancy. So each, so you have to check the vacancy for each of these universities, if they have vacancies or if they have an advertisement put out. And in general, it's kind of a separate thing. Like there is no distinct procedure for applying for a PhD. All you have to do is check the advertisement and check the requirements that the university needs. It's not as universal as a master's program, so it can completely differ from university to university. But you have to constantly keep checking.
Does students from ISC board or CISC board do also have to give that English test, because it is a course which is identified globally for the uh, uh, first language English in their curriculum.
Hmm.
So
I think it could depend. So that is something you would need to clarify. Because from what I know, some universities do accept, but for some, I think you need to specifically tell them or ask them. So if you do send them a mail or something and let them know, then yeah, you might get an answer.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
There's a question on YouTube by Vasudevan Mani. He's asking that in terms of INR, what would be the cost of undergraduate course, and what about the student visa? Is it required?
So student, so I'll first answer the visa thing. So student visa, you usually get something known as an MVV or a student visa, and the student visa you get from your university basically. So it's called as a sponsor. So what they basically do is the immigration department fills out a form. You have to give them your personal details and your details and everything, and they basically fill a lot of the form for you, and then you have to go to the interview. So that is different than how it is in Germany, for example. So if you want to apply for, you have to, the interview, you can just like apply within a few weeks or something, and you don't have to apply like way in advance. So in one way, the sponsor does quite a bit for you. And yeah, so so you get a residence permit through the you'll initially have an entry visa, and then once you enter in the Netherlands, you have to show them that entry visa, and then you'll get a residence permit. And that residence permit is applicable for like the entire Schengen region. In Europe you can like go and travel and all that. So it is how it works. And the entrance visa, if I'm not mistaken, I think it for me it was like eligible for 3 months. So within 3 months I had to collect my residence permit. So that, and then with respect to the fees, it can really vary. So in the Netherlands, in general, it is around, for international students, it is like between 11,000, anywhere between 10,000 to even like 19,000 euros a year, which is a lot. It's a lot of money. But if you do have a plan in terms of either a scholarship or a part-time job, because part-time jobs also do pay well, then yeah, I think it is possible. Even if your part-time job is because you have visa restrictions, right? So you can basically work for 16 hours a week in the Netherlands, but still, I think the pay here is good enough. Like for in the hotel industry, I used to get like 650 euros per month. So even for the teaching, it was like it could easily be 1,000, or if you are working as a research assistant, also it could be easily 1,000 euros per month. So so yeah, if it's really worth, and if you're really considering, then yeah, please don't worry too much about the money part if you can afford.
So there's one more question. It's
Yeah.
by Devika. Is the GRE subject test mandatory or just the general test will do?
So in Europe, mostly universities don't look for GRE. They like it does, yeah, you don't need to write a GRE basically. But for the US and Canada, yeah, it is important. And Europe, even in Europe, I think a few universities ask, if I'm not wrong, like Constance in Germany, I think asks for a GRE. And a few places in Switzerland. And Switzerland, the procedure is completely different because is not exactly a part of the Euro Schengen region. They work a bit differently. Even the currency is different. So yeah, with Switzerland, I think you can just check. But other countries, yeah, it's not really required. In Netherlands, nobody asks for GRE.
There's a question by Risal. The whole application to admission procedure can be easily done by yourself, or is it recommended to approach consultants for help?
Um, so it can be done by yourself, but if you are really confused, I think consultants do help in clearing things better, and in kind of giving a more broad view about different universities. But if you're more interested in something doing a bit more specific, and something you know that a certain universities do have, then yeah, I think it's okay to do on your own. um, and consultants, I'm not like super sure. Some of them, I think a lot of them ask money, but yeah, you have to just clarify. I never went for a consultant, but from what I know is that they give like a broad overview, and they will help clarify your doubts, like general doubts with regards to living and expenses and so on. So it completely depends on what you want.
I think the question and answer session can be wrapped now. I will now call upon Anupama to give the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I am Anupama Sarangkem from 3rd CBD. On behalf of Natural Science Association, Placement Office, Zoology Department of St. Joseph College, my deep sense of appreciation
Anupama, a
and
bit loud. Your volume is too low.
okay, sir. My deep sense of appreciation and gratitude to our eminent Mr. Chirag Rajendra Chitter from University of Amsterdam, who spared a time of his busy schedule to grace this webinar with his extremely relevant address on life after bachelor's, applying for university and career prospect, and sharing the valuable experience with us all today. The webinar was very informative and assured that we all gain confidence on our career. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for calling me.
Good
Um,
evening, Chirag.
good evening, sir.
Could
How
you
are you?
identify me? Who am I talking?
Yeah, Dr. K.S. Shivkumar, Mr. K.S. Shivkumar.
Nice to see you, man. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Was nice to talk about this.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I hope everything is okay. The
Yeah,
COVID situation and
yeah, COVID situation is okay. See you.
yeah, yeah,
Chirag, you
okay.
can continue
Uh,
to wait if you have time. After Aditya's session, if there are questions, you can. Or else we can post those questions on the participants to your mail. Is that okay?
yeah. You can just ask me by mail and yeah. Now because of the COVID situation, there could be specific questions as well. So yeah, they can just contact me through mail.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Chirag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anukriti
Uh,
for the next session.
yeah. See you.
I now welcome our second speaker. I'll now request Derek to give the introduction for our second speaker.
On behalf of St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Natural Science Association, Department of Zoology, and Placement Office, a warm welcome to all. I am Derek. I extend to address Mr. Aditya Srinivas, a component in research, scientific analysis, and response making and report making with extensive having developed many scientific papers and dissertation thesis. He has demonstrated understanding and interpretation of provincial, regional, and watershed plans. A person adept in organizing themes, project management, and presentations. Is an expert in analyzing and interpreting environmental regulations and policies with sound judgment in justification reports. Has been skilled at ArcMap, ArcGIS Pro, and is recognized for coming up with innovative methods to develop and deal with problems. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Your volume is a bit low, Aditya. If it could be more.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So yes, good evening, everyone. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Today I'll be talking about studying abroad and specifically Canada. A little bit about myself. My name is Aditya Srinivas. I'm also a Josephite. I completed my studies in 2018. I did CEZ, which is Chemistry, Environmental Science, and Zoology. This was when I had long hair, and this was actually a waterfalls nearby. Currently, I'm a tutor at the same college that I studied in. I, in fact, did post graduation in two programs, which were 1 year each. One was environmental planning, which I finished in 2019 June, and then project management was something I finished in 2020 May. Environmental planning was an 8 month program. We learned a lot about regulations and environmental planning related part of municipalities in Canada. We also had about a 2 month internship wherein I volunteered for an organization called Quarta Land Trust, and I helped them file applications regarding conservation and environmental planning. I also was a tutor when I was doing project management as well, but I was not a full-time worker back then. Why did I do project management after environmental planning? Was because I wanted to learn how environmental projects actually are run. So I was interested in the management part of it. Because of that, I did project management as well. Uh, Moving on to education in Canada, there are two types actually. One is obviously the conventional masters, and the other one is postgraduate certificates. And I think 80 to 90% of the international students would go for postgraduate certification because of the reasons which I would be mentioning a little later. So first we'll finish masters. So the master's programs in Canada would require a 4-year undergraduate education in most cases. So if you have done something like engineering, a BTech, it would be very easy to get into masters. However, people like me who have just done BSc, a 3-year program, would face problems when getting to masters because Canada recognizes a 4-year undergraduate education. However, in some cases, if you demonstrate that you have really good scores, you are really great at research, you are maybe doing an internship, you got great letters of recommendation. If you have all of those, then some universities can accept you. But then again, the chances are very low. So they're normally for 16 months, the duration. One course, one semester rather, is about 3 months or 4 months with the holidays and all of that. And one educational year in Canada would be 8 months. And masters, which would be a 2-year program, would generally maybe take 16 months, usually. It would cost you around 40,000 Canadian dollars per year. Okay, so it is just for education, and that's like an average. So that's about 22 lakhs Indian rupees. It is absolutely very expensive, but it is what it is. However, there are some universities in rural areas and in provinces which are not very well known, which would just charge you about 15 to 20,000 Canadian dollars per year, which would cost you about 8 to 11 lakhs Indian currency. These universities are obviously in rural areas, and you might not get the same opportunities which you would in a city like Toronto. So a University of Toronto would definitely give you more opportunities and a better skill set than, say, a university in a rural area somewhere in Nova Scotia, for instance. But if you want a university degree, you can surely get it. It is cheaper over there, absolutely. But universities in cities definitely have better education. So universities are ranked by global reputation, what the salaries of their employees, what they're actually making, and also research and publications and all of that stuff. So I've actually listed the important universities in Canada. This is based off of QS World University Ranking of 2019. University of Toronto is the first one in Canada, and it is 28th rank in the world. So nothing when compared to the universities in USA. However, these are still pretty good, is what I feel. So this is a list. It has about 25, I guess, important universities in Canada. So there are two types of MSCs in Canada. One is a course-based MSc, wherein you just apply on their website and you just wait to hear back from them. So it is as simple as that. There is no speaking to the professor, no speaking to the supervisor, none of that. And then there is a research-based MSc, which is when you choose your university professor, you write to them, and they evaluate you based on your skills, based on the research which you're doing, based on the CGPA you've gotten, all of that. And most universities will accept you only if the professor that you're speaking to accepts you. So normally 99% of the universities will not admit you just like that. So you have to have acceptance of the professor that you are willing to do research with, and then the universities would accept you. Um, so while the professor is evaluating you, it is very essential that you evaluate them, because you would be stuck with this professor for the next 2 years, and you should be absolutely sure about the research what they're doing, because you would be pretty much in that field. And research-based MSc is more suitable for a 3-year undergraduate program, because a course-based MSc is when you don't have a rapport with the professor that you're speaking to. So if you have done a 4-year undergraduate, like engineering or something like that, then you can easily go for a course-based MSc. If it's a 3-year, it's a lot harder. And if it's a research-based MSc where you're speaking to a professor, where you're sending them your letter of recommendation, your statement of purpose, and all of that, if you have still done a 3-year program, and if you can demonstrate you're really good at whatever you're doing, you can easily get into a research-based MSc. But then again, the chances are pretty low. So then we're speaking about postgraduate certificates. This would accept a 3-year undergraduate education. So you can, if you are still into masters, you can do one thing. You can finish a 1-year postgraduate certificate, which is for 8 months, and then you can apply for masters. So you can do something like that as well. If you do one postgraduate certificate, you would be considered of doing a 4-year graduate education, which would make you eligible for getting into a master's degree. So these are 8 months. 8 months would be 1 year again. And this would also have an internship usually. And there are obviously programs without internships too. But as postgraduate certificates are more technical thesis based, I would suggest getting into programs which have internships. And there are also some postgraduate certificate programs which are for 16 months, which would be 2 years in Canadian education timeline. And also an internship can help you get jobs, easily, much more easily. And a lot of international students soon after graduation can face a hard time finding jobs in their field, but an internship can surely open more doors for you. So I would strongly recommend getting an internship if you're doing a postgraduate certification. It would cost you much lesser than, it would be much less than a master's program. It would just cost you around 15 to 18,000 Canadian dollars per year, or per course rather, because normally they are 1-year programs. And these would cost you around 8 to 10 lakhs in Indian rupees. And this is just for the education. This is excluding the stay and what were you doing apart from studies in Canada. It's totally affordable and easier than masters. It is not as intense as masters. However, you'll be learning practical stuff, and you'd be very much into the technical aspect of whatever you're studying. Internships are great for jobs, as I mentioned before, and you can do 2 programs in 2 years. So if you're someone like me, and if you are interested in a couple of different fields, you can finish one program, get those skills, get into another program, and then get those skills as well. So I did environmental planning and project management. You can do in the fields which you actually like. So something like that is also possible. So some good colleges, because there's a lot of colleges which mainly concentrate on international students, because international students pay around 4 times more than what domestic students pay. And due to this, a lot of colleges have become very cut style. So I would suggest you to have some, to judge the colleges pretty well before getting into it, to get proper education. So 4 really good colleges are, one, Fleming College, and I think it's the only college in whole of Canada which has its own which has a campus only for environment related courses. So if you're into aquaculture, fish and wildlife, environmental planning, or if you're into sustainable waste management, all of these programs are available at Fleming College. Yeah, like I said, it has a separate campus only for environment related courses. There's Algonquin and Seneca, which are equally good. And then there is Centennial College, which is great for engineering, computer-based, and IT courses. So if you're into that, you can get into Centennial College. So these four are pretty good. The others are okayish because, as I said before, they concentrate more on getting people from abroad rather than giving a good education. So that's like one drawback of colleges in Canada. However, you can really find some good colleges, like I mentioned here. So what next? When you have chosen to immigrate to Canada, what do you have to do? Like Chirag mentioned, IELTS is an English-based exam, and you would need it absolutely. There's nothing else needed. GRE is not mandatory. There may be some really good universities which might ask you, or you can just do a GRE and demonstrate to them that you've actually scored really well in GRE, and hence they have to take you. You can make a justification like that. But generally, it's just IELTS, so nothing else is asked. IELTS and your transcripts, of course. So IELTS is an exam out of 9 bands. So you just need to get 7 bands and nothing lower than 6.5 in 4 of the exams. So 4 exams are speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So if you can score an average of 7, you're good. And it's not a very difficult exam as well. With very little preparation, I could get 7.5 very easily. So yes, I think it is, and all the resources are there online as well. So you can actually learn about IELTS and learn to score better from YouTube videos. You just have to study for 2 years to get a work permit for 3 years. So I think immigration to Canada, if you're planning to stay here, is very easy. The main reason is because they don't have a lot of people here. Canada is the second largest in area in the whole world after Russia, and it's got the population of 3 times Bangalore's population. So Bangalore's population is about 12 million, and Canada's population is around 37 million. So the whole country has about the population of 3 times Bangalore's population. And due to that, they are very pro-immigration. So they've taken a lot of people. And I think in 2019, international students, I think were about 600,000. So there's a lot of international students coming in. So you have to study for 2 years to get a work permit for 3 years. Where you just have to work 1 or 2 years to get a permanent residence. So they give you permanent residence with regard to points. So there's something called CRS points, and better you score, it'll be easier to get a permanent residence. So you just have to work for around 1 or 2 years after your studies to get a permanent residence. And you just need to have permanent residence for 3 years if you want a citizenship. So the pros, what are the pros of living in Canada if you are planning to stay here? There's excellent social security. So CRB and CESB are funds given for COVID. So CERB stands for Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and CESB stands for Canada Emergency Student Benefit. So those people who did not have any job, who could not find job due to COVID because everything was locked down for the last 3 months, 3.5 months, the government gave $2,000 per month, no questions asked. Even I got it. You just had to work maybe 9 months the previous year to just get this, and a lot of people actually got this. There was no questions asked. You just had to apply it, and you would get it in your bank account in about 2-3 days. There is pension for everyone. So if you retire after 60, the government pays you pension. So these are just small, I've actually mentioned very few social security measures taken by the Canadian government, but I'm pretty sure there's like a lot of them. Free healthcare. So if you get your PR, if you get your permanent residence, there's free healthcare for you. You don't have to go pay for your, doctor checkups. Even if you get cancer and if you get treated, it'll be absolutely free. Free education. So there's a caveat over here. So you wouldn't be getting free education after your PR, but you would be getting a subsidized education. And if you have a child, they get free education. So subsidized education would be something like if you're paying $16,000 for a program as an international student, you would be paying just 4,000 or 3,000 if you get a PR, because you would be considered a domestic resident. And you can travel up to 183 countries without a visa. So there's no visa to travel to 183 countries around the world. And the culture is welcoming and very diverse. Not even once did I experience any kind of racism. People are very much interested in what your culture is, what your food is. They say hi, they say hi and good evening, good morning, all of that when you meet people on the roads, complete strangers, but they actually do this. So they're generally very nice people, and they are normally very welcoming. You would not face any racism and all of that over here. And last but not the least, cannabis, which is marijuana, that is legal over here. So they've legalized it in 2016, and yeah, for those people who do smoke marijuana, you can do it over here legally. Some cons: the climate can be very harsh. So we got about 5 to 6 months of winter. It can go up to -37. So this is a screenshot from my phone. So I actually saw -37 in Canada. So -37 degrees. But generally it is around -30 in the peak of winters, which is normally in January. So yeah, and these are actually cars covered in snow. So there was a snowfall, and you can barely see the cars. So these things can actually happen, and the climate, as I said, can get very harsh. It is expensive. So when compared to India, stay over here is absolutely, there's no question. It is pretty expensive. So just for basic necessities and basic amenities, just basic stuff, you just live in a small little room. You may be sharing it with other people, and then you can get your groceries and your phone bill. That itself would cost you around 10,000 Canadian dollars per year, which would be around 5.5 to 6 lakhs. So you would actually have to spend that apart from education per year, just to live in Canada, just to survive. Yeah, of course you can go to part-time jobs, and part-time jobs do pay you a lot, but it all depends on how well you can balance education and work. You have to be emotionally strong. So we have around 5 months of winter wherein you can't really go out to maybe take a walk and all of that. So you have to be emotionally strong. I've seen a lot of people missing their family, missing their parents, missing India. So all of that is quite natural, but you have to be emotionally strong to cope up with staying away from your family and from India. If you're emotionally strong, then you can actually easily transition and stay in Canada if you want to. Culture shock. I can go on and on about this. The culture is totally different over here from Indian culture. People are nicer over here. You have to keep the door open for the person behind you when you're getting into a building or something. So all of these etiquettes are there, which we never, we never understood or we never had in India. So due to that, you might experience some kind of a culture shock. But then again, in about 1 or 2 years, you would understand the Canadian culture and you would get accustomed to it. So tips: you absolutely don't need a consultancy service. There are a lot of consultancy services which rip you off, basically. So they take around 20 to 25,000 rupees, and they don't. I mean, they do a good job, but I would suggest you. There's like a lot of resources on YouTube, on the internet, so you can do the whole process on your own. You absolutely have no need for a consultancy. Except for legal procedures like visa. So you can, if at all you find consultancy, if they're doing it for free. So thankfully, I got a consultancy called Advice, which is on MG Road in Bangalore. You can go to them and you can actually get the whole thing done for free. So how they work is that they get a commission from the college. So if you apply to a college and get admitted, the college pays them. So you don't have to pay anything, and they can even apply for your visas for free, completely. But before everything, you have to go and talk to them whether all the services are free. I don't know whether things have changed now, but 2 years ago, this was how it was. And even then, I would strongly recommend you, if a consultancy is asking a lot of money, I would suggest you not to go for it. I would strongly suggest that you do everything on your own. So here's a small video of how it was in the winter. So this was my way to the college actually, and yeah, so this was how it was. Yeah, so it was covered in snow and the conditions were harsh. It might have been maybe minus 20 or something then, but it does look very beautiful, I guess. So yes, that's pretty much it. Thank you, and I would like to answer your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Aditya. I think Sumishal will take over.
Yes, sir. So the panel is now open for discussion. Participants kindly unmute and ask your questions briefly. So in the meantime, I'll ask a question from Shriyam Bharadwaj on YouTube. So
Yep.
she asked if you could throw light on GPA as to what is GPA actually.
Okay, so CGPA is your percentage converted into a mark of 10 or a mark of 5. So there are, suppose if you get a 70%, that would be, I think, considered 3.65 or 3.7 CGPA. So over here in Canada, they don't take percentages; they take CGPA. So there are calculators to convert your percentages into CGPA. And I'm pretty sure even on your marks card from St. Joseph's, they give you marks in CGPA because I had it that way. So it all depends on the university as well. So if your university asks you for a particular CGPA, then you'll have to get that much, or else you would not be admitted into the university. However, for colleges, they're not very particular about your CGPA. If you have other experiences or if you have a very good letter of recommendation, yeah.
Thank you, sir. If anyone has questions, kindly unmute and ask.
Okay, I think we'll share Aditya's mail ID. If there are people
Hello.
approaching us, we can proceed. Yeah.
Okay, there's
Yes. Go ahead.
someone.
Yeah, hello. I have a question that what is the procedure for applying in the PhD program in the universities across Canada?
Okay, so PhD would be similar to masters. You would have to speak to the professor first, and PhD program is a bit hard because, uh, I mean, if you're in the biology field, the biodiversity in India is pretty different from what it is in Canada. Unless you are interested in what they do, or they're really interested in what they do, or if you're doing something very general, then you can easily get into a PhD program. But I would say if you can get into a master's program in Canada and then transition to a PhD program, I think that would be a better option. Yeah.
And what are the scopes of scholarships for the PhD program?
So scholarship is, so the funny thing is that normally you get a scholarship after you finish a semester. So I got uh, two scholarships after one semester I got one, and then after the second semester I got another. So generally they don't give you a scholarship before you enter the program. I'm speaking of only postgraduate certificates. You would, however, if you do really well in the first semester, if you do really well in the first year, then you would get it. You'd get around $1,000 sometimes if you're lucky. So also it also depends on your CGPA. Then again, if you score like an 80%, you would get lesser than what you would if you got a 90%. So it is something like that. However, for universities, there would be scholarships. but domestic students are prioritized. Is what I it is what it looks like from what I've seen from different friends' testimonies. Yeah.
We have Devika who is asking to elaborate more on the 1 year course in Canada after BSc.
Okay, so it's the same thing. It's postgraduate certification itself. So you can either do two postgraduate certifications or choose one postgraduate certification, which is of 2 years, if you want to work in Canada for more than 1 year. So if you are getting out of India with a 3 year undergraduate education, and if no master's university accepts you, then you do 1 year of postgraduate certification to get 4 years of graduation education, and then you apply for masters. So then the master's university would consider you eligible because you've done 3+1. So 3 years of undergraduation in India and then 1 year in Canada. So they would accept you then.
Thank you, sir. So,
Yeah.
can you please elaborate on if there is anything else apart from research that we can do after this BSc course?
Absolutely. So if you're getting into a postgraduate certification, it is a lot more technical based rather than research based. So if you're a person who just wants to get into your field of profession, you can just finish a 2 year postgraduate diploma in something technical. So what I did was environmental planning. So we had a lot of practical stuff to do. We had to write reports. There was very little research that we had to do. And even the place where I interned, right, the place where I volunteered for the internship, that was also pretty much totally practical. There was very less research, very less dissertation, and all of that stuff. So postgraduate diploma course, if you are into technical aspects and not much into research, I would strongly suggest you to get into a postgraduate certification program. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Those will be the questions for today.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening,
I now
Aditya.
request.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Nice to see you, man. You are a different
Thank you.
Aditya now.
Yeah, no more long hair.
Got my point.
You must have liked it now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could not convince you when you are in India.
Yeah.
Who is that who convinced you in Canada?
Nobody, sir. It's just myself. I had long hair from the past 5 years, so I just cut it recently. I cut it maybe 1 month back.
Okay.
So,
Nice
yeah.
to see you. We'll talk some other time regarding this.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you.
Share your email IDs on your PPT, man. Once let everybody note down if
Okay.
they want.
I'll just do that now. Can I do it now or?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll now request Mukta to give the vote of thanks.
Okay, just a minute. So this is my
Yes, sir.
email ID. Yeah, this is my email ID for those who want my email ID.
Good evening, everyone. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and extend my gratitude to Mr. Aditya Srinivasan on behalf of all participants present here. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and making this session fruitful for all those gathered here today. I'm 100% positive that your informative session has given us students a clear picture and idea of the next step that we must take to pursue higher education abroad and go further to establish a successful career too.
Thank you, Mukta. Now we'll begin the third talk. I will now request Tressa to introduce our third speaker for the evening.
A very warm welcome to one and all present here. It is my privilege to welcome our last speaker for today, Mr. Nitin Ravikant sir, who is a PhD scholar at University of South Carolina, USA. He is also a teaching assistant at Department of Biological Sciences, University of South Carolina. His achievements include RMBL Graduate Fellowship Grant, CSIR National Eligibility Test in Lectureship, Indian Academy of Sciences Summer Research Fellowship, and Government of Karnataka Vision Group of Science and Technology. He has even published a lot of papers, technical reports, and is also coming up with his books on butterflies of urban greeneries and butterflies of Bengaluru. He is also an alumni of St. Joseph's College, batch of 2011-2014. Today, he will be delivering his talk on how to apply to the universities in USA. On behalf of St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Department of Zoology, Professor Dr. Jaishankar Sir, Natural Science Association, Professor Kiranjeevan Sir, Placement Office SJC, I extend a hearty warm welcome to you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Just a second. Hello. This is Nitin. Can you hear me? Am I
Yes,
audible?
you're audible,
Oh,
Nitin.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
yeah, thank God.
No,
So should
start
I?
with this time.
Yeah. Okay. Should I start right away? Okay. Just give me a second to share my screen. Uh, yeah. Just give me a second. Is my screen visible now?
Nitin, not yet.
Okay. Just give me a second.
Yeah, it is. It is now.
It is okay. All right. So okay. Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Nitin, and I'm a PhD student at the University of South Carolina, and I'm doing my PhD in ecology and evolution. Specifically, I'm interested in looking at why maladaptation occurs and why maladaptation persists in populations, and I use a combination of genomics and bioinformatics to understand it. So before, I get on to talking about how it is to do a PhD in the US and what it takes. I mean, the first thing I really want to talk to you guys about is, is a PhD a right thing for you or not? Because to be a successful PhD candidate or to be, to get a PhD successfully in the US, it requires a lot more than just being brilliant or just being a genius. So hopefully after this, I mean, when I was preparing this presentation, I kind of realized that I was being a little cynical or a little, negative. But I tried to paint the real picture and also, at the same time, of an idea of why PhD is a really good thing to do. So, for anyone who's interested in doing a PhD in the US, I would definitely recommend reading PhD comics. I mean, it's a very weird thing recommending you to read a comic, but if you want to understand what it is to do a PhD and what it is to do a PhD in the US and how the life of a PhD student is, definitely read PhD comics. It's insanely accurate. Mhm. So before I start with uh, today's talk, I'd just like to say what I do for my PhD. So these are my fieldwork sites in Colorado in the US, where I spend all my summers except for this summer because of COVID. And I work with this small butterfly known as the cabbage white. So I look at why cabbage white butterflies lay eggs on the plants that they lay and what determines their behavior and its underlying genetics. So I do a lot of behavioral genetics and I do a lot of population genetics and genomics to understand how host plant choice is affected in this butterfly species, and in turn to understand how uh, climate change and how invasive species change affect the population of this species and in general other species of butterflies. So the first thing you need to think about before you even apply for a PhD is a PhD a right thing for you, and what, or in another word, is what are the good reasons to do a PhD. And the first or the most important reason that you want to do a PhD is if you wish to make a contribution uh, to your field that you're really passionate about. I mean, this should be your driving force. If you do not have this, driving force, then you really need to think about, is a PhD right for you? And this was probably the main reason that I wanted to do a PhD, because I loved ecology and evolution, and more evolution than ecology, and I wanted to just spend my entire life, studying evolution. Or and another really good reason, if you want a career in academia, either teaching or research or any other related field in the industry where a PhD expertise is appreciated. If you want to teach in India or anywhere else in the world, having a PhD is really important, because we used to have a lot more. I mean, earlier you could clear your NET and then get into a lectureship, but I think there is a lot of shift now where they require you to have a PhD, and especially if you want to teach undergrads or grad level courses, so you kind of need a PhD. And if you're doing research in a university or in a research center, like for example NCBS or IITs or any of the ICERs, you definitely need a PhD. So if you want a career in academia, then it is really important you get a PhD. And lastly, you enjoy the joy of discovering something new, even after it beats you down for weeks or months together. So if that is something you really enjoy, the grueling process of going through things just to have the satisfaction of finding something new at the end of it, then I would say a PhD is right for you. And what are some of the reasons not to do a PhD? I mean, if there are good reasons to do a PhD, there are also good reasons not to do a PhD. First thing, you should not be applying for a PhD just because of peer pressure. Let's say, you're trying for a PhD, and we all know, being Indians, that Samajik ka beta. So if that is something that's happening, then it's definitely not a good reason to apply for a PhD, because a PhD takes 5 to 7 years in the US, and it's a grueling process. So if you're just doing it for the sake of peer pressure, then do yourself a favor and do not apply for a PhD. You started a job after your bachelor's or your master's, and you think it's a horrible job, and you say, oh, I just want to go back to school, and I think doing a PhD is much easier compared to having this horrible job, then no, that's not a good reason to do a PhD, because it will guarantee that you will not enjoy PhD, and also there's a high chance that you will drop out of it. And misplaced genius complex, this is something that a lot of people who enter PhDs face, and a lot of people who are this. So genius complex is where you think you are a genius and you're going to just solve the entire world's problems from your PhD, and you have these unrealistic expectations of what you expect out of a PhD. So if you have this and if you keep pushing towards that, then that means you are setting yourself up for disappointment, and you're setting yourself up for a lot of unmet expectations, and that will kind of push you down, and you might not enjoy doing a PhD, or you might not even successfully do it. So, and if you want to do a PhD to earn money, then it's definitely it's not the right thing to do it. I mean, I'm not saying that if you do a PhD you'll end up with less money. You do a PhD, you get a good job. I mean, being a professor pays really well. I mean, it's very respectable. It's probably the most respectable job you have after being a doctor, if you ask me. So it has a lot of respect. I mean, you get a lot of respect. You do get good enough money, but if you're in it only for the money, then I don't think doing a PhD is a good job, because if you read this comic, it's again from PhD Comics. You can actually instead of spending 5 or 7 years doing a PhD, you could as well spend it getting into a company and then working your way through the ranks to earn more money. So if you're just in it for the money, then it's not a good idea to do a PhD. And you should not be doing a PhD just because you're insecure about your own life choices or anything like that. For example, let's say, or everyone else around me is a doctor, or I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't know. I mean, I just like, what if I have a doctor in front of my name? I think that'll be nice. And if that's the reason you're trying to do a PhD, then I really think that it might not be fruitful in the long run to do a PhD. And lastly, which I think is a really important thing, is that your career goals do not benefit from a PhD. For example, a lot of industry jobs have no benefit of you having a PhD. For example, it'll be better if you join those industry jobs right after your masters, because then you can get promoted faster, you can get promoted quicker, and you can learn the ropes of the work faster than actually going to school, spending 5 or 7 years in a related field, and then coming back and specializing in an industrial job that you want to do. And the reason why I say these out at the beginning itself is because, I mean, dropout rates in PhD is very high, not just in India, also in the US and all over. So, people apply for a PhD having a lot of expectations, and when they have these unrealistic expectations and some of them are not met, they just get disheartened and they, drop out of PhDs. So that's the reason you really need to think about why you want to do a PhD, and the reasons why you want to do a PhD are, if they are actually good reasons, or is it just something that is, if some of the reasons that I've listed here, if any of these are the reasons why you want to pursue a PhD, I would definitely recommend that you spend enough time thinking about it and then choose if you want to do a PhD or not. So what does a PhD entail? I mean, especially in the US, or this is specifically to the US, but I think it's also general for most of the other countries, including India. The first thing is, 5 to 7 years of constant hard work with, the same pay. So let's say you sign up, when you get your offer letter, they say they're going to pay you $25,000 a year. You will probably be getting $25,000 a year for the next 7 years. I mean, you will not get increases, you will not get bonuses like what you have in other jobs. And you have to work hard for at least 5 to 7 years. I mean, if you're lucky, you can finish it in 5 years, but if you're working in ecology and evolution, then there's always an element of uncertainty, because your organisms might not obey schedules like the way you set it. So 5 to 7 years of constant hard work where you work like 12, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week or 6 days a week, and then for 5 to 7 years with practically no vacation or very little vacation. So that is what a PhD entails. And you have rejections and successes throughout. It's not like you enter a PhD and all you do is you publish papers, you move forward. It's not a linear trend. It's a sinusoidal wave. It keeps going up. Places where you get your papers rejected, you have places where you get grants rejected, you have places where you win grants, places where you publish amazing papers in amazing journals and things like that. So it's basically life. It's not, you should not go into a PhD thinking it's going to be amazing. It's just going to be a linear trend. And if you go into a PhD with this mindset, where you think it's just going to be, what do you call, wild poppies on the field, then it's not, it's totally unrealistic. So you need to expect that a PhD is going to have its own failures and its own successes. And it involves a ton of reading. I mean, on an average, you might be reading like 300 to 400 papers a year and like 20 to 30 books. I mean, that's at least the average that you are expected to read to get a good understanding of your field, and you kind of stay ahead of the curve. And then with reading comes tons of writing. I mean, you might spend like 10 to 12 hours a week just writing, and not writing, which involves a lot of your effort on thinking and critical thinking processes and decimating it down and giving it to your advisor or your committee and then getting feedback from them and things like that. So it involves a lot of reading and a lot of writing for sure. And then especially in the US, if you are an immigrant, that means anyone from India who's applying into the US, I think you should expect to teach for most of your PhD, unless your advisor or your program has so much money that they do not want you to teach. But given how the situation now is with Corona, or even just pre-Corona, I would say that you should expect to teach. So I mean, teaching responsibilities can include somewhere between 20 to 30 hours a week, and during exam seasons it can go even up to 40 hours. So you should balance teaching, reading, writing, and doing your research at the same time. So there's a joke about doing PhD in the US where they say you do your research in your part, in your free time, because most of the time in the US is taken with teaching, especially if you are a teaching assistant, because you have to first prepare your classes, you need to prepare the syllabus for your classes, you need to prepare, and then you usually most teaching assistants teach for like 6 to 12 hours a week, and the rest of it is spent in having office hours where you meet with students to clarify whatever questions and doubts they have, and grading. And then around the clock you should also be doing your research, so you need to have very good planning skills if you want to do a PhD successfully in the US. And it also involves taking courses in the first 2 years of your PhD. This is something that is absent in you, where you just you start your PhD and you just dive right into your project, and you kind of just get to work on your project. Whereas in the US, the first 2 years, or at least the first year, you take a lot of courses which are related to your PhD, so that you get some deeper understanding of your field of study. And the most important or crucial thing, if you ask me, is to balance, balancing your PhD with your family and relationships, because I'll tell you in some of the next slides as to what happens if you do not balance it. So yeah, this is what a PhD entails. I mean, I know this is a lot to take in at one go, and it might just sound negative, but this is something I enjoy. I enjoy reading a lot. I mean, I spend most of my time reading. I enjoy most of my time writing, and I love teaching. I when I was in Joseph's, I understood the importance of teaching, because I've had such amazing professors at Joseph's, and that really inspired me to become, or get into academia and actually actively teach. And I enjoy teaching, and it has its own ups and downs. You have a lot of fun teaching to students, and when you feel really happy when students understand what you're teaching, and what when you get things right. And there are also times when you don't like it, when you have to just create, like, let's say 60 answer scripts or 60 lab reports in like 2 days or something. So it has its ups and downs at the same time. And what is it, and what is your pathway? Let's say if you want to be in academia, what is the pathway to do that? So first is your bachelor's degree, which in India is 3 years usually, and then you get a master's degree. If you are doing a master's degree in India, it's 2 years, or 1 year in Europe, and also in Canada and other countries. And if you ask me personally, you should only do your master's abroad if you are getting a fully funded position. If not, I would say it's better to just do a master's in India, because basically a lot of people in the US especially go to their PhD right after their bachelor's. So masters in the US is something which is not encouraged, especially if you're doing your PhD. So I would definitely suggest that you do your masters in India. It doesn't really matter where you do your masters in India. As long as you have a master's in India, you can just apply for a PhD after that. So that is what I would recommend. That's my personal recommendation. That's exactly what I did, and I'm doing PhD in really good place as well. And then once you're done with your masters, you either do an integrated PhD. You do an integrated PhD, right? If you join after bachelor's, and that usually takes around 6 years. Or if you have a master's, you do your PhD, which takes 5 years in India and US, and also in Canada, 3 to 4 years in in Europe, depending upon what kind of project you're working with, and the same in Singapore and Australia. So in India and US, but if you're doing it, especially in the college and division, expect it to go up to 7 years. And like I said, this is another thing which I keep reiterating. If you're in it for the money, it's not a great thing, because if you see here, grad students earn way less than anyone else, and mostly, even if it's a university, it's the football coaches which earn millions of dollars, whereas even the university president or tenured and untenured professors earn very a fraction of it. And then once you are done with your PhD, you do a postdoc. Some people do it for do one postdoc, which could be just 2 years or 3 years. And there are people who do postdocs for their entire life. These are known as career postdocs, where they just keep moving on from postdoc to postdoc. Or, if you're right after your PhD, if you want to enter a job in the industry where you have jobs specifically for, where it requires a PhD, then you can enter a job right after your PhD without doing a postdoc. So once you're done with your postdoc is when you apply for being an assistant professor or a faculty or any other teaching or research position in academia. So this is something which I struggled with for PhD, as to what kind of a PhD would suit me and where do I envision myself doing my PhD. So this is some of the similarities slash differences between doing what a PhD entails in India, Europe, and US. So in India, the duration is 5 years, 6 years for an PhD. Europe 3 or 4 years, and USA it's 5 years. I mean, if you're doing a PhD, you should be getting paid. If you're not getting paid for a PhD, definitely do not do a PhD. It's like that program is not worth it. You should be paid from day one till the time you finish your PhD. When I say finish your PhD, 5 years, you cannot expect to stay for 10 years and expect them to pay. So if the duration of the PhD is 5 years, you should expect for the entire duration of 5 years. And in India, if if you're a CSR fellow or something like that, you could expect a raise after 3 years if you're, if you could be promoted as a senior research assistant or senior research fellow. So yeah, SRF and JRFs. So from JRF, if you get promoted to a SRF, you could get a raise. In Europe, again, it depends on country to country, and in the US, it's mostly you won't get a raise. Whatever amount you get offered in your offer letter before you join the PhD is what you agree to get for the rest of the 5 years that you have, unless your advisor is good enough and just pays a raise out of her own or his pocket. And coursework is also a mandatory thing in a lot of Indian PhD programs. In Europe, you do not do coursework. You directly, jump into doing a master's and so you jump into doing your research and you continue doing your research for 3 or 4 years that you're there. And in the US, the first 2 years is really important, and you do a lot of coursework for sure. And in India, the checkpoints, when I say checkpoints, is what are some of the things that you need to finish or qualify for before you actually get your PhD. In India, it's usually the comprehensive exam, which could be 2 parts or just 1 part, depending upon what institute you're doing from, and it's usually in the second year of your PhD. And Europe also, you have something called as a comprehensive exam or a research proposal, where basically what they do in these exams is they ask you to talk about what you have done so far in the 2 years or 1 year that you're there in the institute, and they ask you to then they test your ability to answer questions based on your own project, your own critical thinkers, and how you will solve if at all you fall into pitfalls in your PhD. And in the US, you have a qualifying exams that you take in the first year of your PhD, and you have a research proposal or a comprehensive exam in the second and third year of your PhD. And what are the admission requirements, to do a PhD in these three countries slash continent? As in India, you give an entrance exam. It could be CSIR, it could be or GG Bills, or it could be any other specific exam which is specific to the institute. And in Europe, you definitely have to give TOEFL or IELTS, because that is for English proficiency exam. And then you apply to specific positions, because in Europe, PhD works as it basically works on job vacancy kind of a scheme, where if there's a vacancy open there, advertise it, and then you apply for that specific position, and then you interview for the process. And in the US, you give your TOEFL and IELTS, and there's an additional step of having to write the GRE, and you apply to specific positions or advisor or program, and I'll tell you what the difference is in the next few slides, and then you have your interview. And the application timeline before you actually start your PhD is 6 to 8 months in India, because you kind of write your let's say if you're writing JRF, so if you're writing NET, or if you're writing GG Bills, you write it in December, you start your program in August. And Europe, it's 2 to 4 months, because it's, like I said, it's more of a job vacancy kind of a thing. They have a very short window where you can apply, and then they conduct interviews right away. And within like 2 or 3 months, they'll tell you if you've got into the program or not. And in the US, it takes anywhere between 8 months to a year, depending upon when you first contact your program or the specific advisor. So what's the pathway to a program in the US? So again, I definitely highly recommend that you guys, read PhD comics, because it, like I said, it depicts the life of a PhD student like no other comic or no other process does. So the first thing is, you basically get a master's degree in June or July of the previous year, and then you apply to a specific program. When I say specific program, let's say it's a biologic, PhD in biology, or PhD in genetics, or PhD in developmental biology. So applying to a specific program is more of a thing for, molecular biology, developmental biology, genetics, and biochemistry. Whereas in ecology and evolution, you do not apply to the program. You apply to a specific advisor saying that I want to work with this person, and this is who I want to do my PhD under. And this you usually do it in September and October. And then you take your exams, GRE and TOEFL, somewhere between September and November, depending upon how well you're prepared and how much time you have to spare. And then you get your recommendations from the faculty who are supporting your application, saying that this person is a good student, he has all the skills that is required to do a PhD, and whatever other uh, comments that they can make on your application from people who have taught you or people who you have worked with sometime between September and December. And then you interview with your potential advisor. This is mostly over Skype or Zoom. I did it over Skype in 2017 November. So this is where you first write an email to the person that you feel like working with, and that person goes through your email, and if that person is interested, then they'll write back to you and say, we'll just uh, schedule a Zoom call or a Skype call, and then you talk over Skype for probably an hour or two, and then she or he kind of gets an idea of how you are as a person, and if you are someone who's that person, who the professor wants to support or not. And then once this step is over, then you might get an email from the advisor saying that yeah, fine, you apply for the program, I'll support your application. And that usually happens during December, where most of the applications are due. And then once that is done, you interview with the program faculty, where your advisor, where your potential advisor says, this is the student I want to be admitted into the program. And then you attend an interview with the entire program faculty, because they want to see if you are up to the standards of their specific program to be in that PhD program. And this usually happens over Skype or Zoom if you are an Indian applying US, because getting an in-person flight ticket and visa and everything is it's too much of a hassle. So they've just changed it to Skype or Zoom over in the last few years. But if you are applying for a PhD position, you usually get invited to attend in-person interviews, and then you talk to the entire faculty in the program, and then they evaluate you. And then they'll tell you if you've been admitted or not in April, and then you start school in the next, in August. And let's say applying for starting your PhD in January or February, then this gets shifted by 6 months. But this is the general schedule of how a PhD, the pathway of a PhD is in the US. So what should you really concentrate on, in your application, or this is what makes or breaks your application, or your chances of getting a PhD in the US. If you're applying for a PhD in biology, prior research experience, or at least demonstration of research potential is literally the most important thing. If the reason why I say this is because in the US, if you've done your bachelor's in the US, the people who are admitting you into the program know the quality and content of what you did for your bachelor's. Whereas if they really do not know how the education system is in India, they have no idea what goes into the program, what people are being taught. And even though Indians especially learn 3 or 4 times more than what a bachelor student learns in their entire 4-year bachelor's in the US. I mean, the coursework that we go through, especially in Joseph's, because I know how in depth the syllabus is in Joseph's, it's way more than what anyone would study in their 4 years of bachelor's in the US. So even if you have studied way more, it really doesn't matter so much, because for them what matters is what have you worked with before, and how potential can you demonstrate in that 1 hour or 2 hour interview that you do with them. So this is something that they really look at, because they really do not know the quality or condition of education in India. And because they do not really know what kind of universities or colleges that you come from, they entirely rely on who is recommend you and what the recommendation letter says. If your recommendation letter, can give something very detailed about detailed account of what you are as a person, what you were how your progression was from your first year of undergrad to your third year of undergrad or whatever, it really makes a huge difference. I mean, I've put it in capital letters, or sorry, put it in bold, simply because this is what makes or breaks a decision in most PhD programs. I mean, since they really cannot judge what you have studied, they judge based on what your recommendation letter says. So it's really important to get some recommendation letters from people who you have worked with or who has taught you for a long period of time, and that like recommendation letter to be as detailed as possible. And your writing skills. So they usually judge this based on the first email that you write to them and the attached CV or writing sample that you send to them. So if your writing skills are not up to the level, you usually have issues with getting your application forwarded. So three things which I really recommend you concentrate on or develop over the course of your undergrad or masters is get some research experience or at least learn how to do research if you really cannot get hands-on research experience, and try to get people who try to develop good relationships with your professors so that they can actually evaluate you good and they can give honest opinions about you to the university that you're applying to and develop your writing skills. That these are really the three things that I would recommend that you focus on developing. And the last thing which I've realized that people do see a lot is your ability to work in a group or integrate with the lab group. So, for example, from my own personal experience, so this year we interviewed 5 people who could have joined our lab, and we did not admit a single one because all of them had stellar research experience. They had good recommendation letters, and they had done research before. But a lot of most of them had issues working as a team. If you might gel well with the group, or they might have issues working as a team. If you have this, I mean, this is something that a lot of Indians have, where we are very competitive because that is the way we've brought up. So if you have cutthroat, competitive nature, and if you think that I can do everything and I know I can't work as part of a team, it is something that you really need to change. That attitude needs to change, and you need to what do you call turn yourself into actually or cultivate habits of working in a group, because that is really important for succeeding in academia. And things that really do not matter much because they are there and people do not pay attention. The first thing is your GP or your percentage or how well you did in your in your bachelor's or your master's or your 10th grade. I know a lot of parents say do your 10th and your life is done. Do your 12th, your life is done. Do your bachelor's or whatever, your life is done. It's not. It's a great GPA really does not make your application any better than what it is. But if you have a bad GPA, then it kind of raises red flags, saying that this person really cannot even get the basically what I'm saying is that universities have a cutoff. Let's say if you meet like 3.0 GPA out of a 5, they say okay fine, this is acceptable. So if you think I have like 5 out of 5 GPA, or I have 100% marks from my bachelor's or my master's and I'm going to get in everywhere, no, that is not right. Because GPA only tells okay fine, this person has this amount of basic understanding of the subject, and it really doesn't say more than that. So if you do not have a great GPA, it's still fine, but make sure that at least you have the cutoff GPA that you are applying to a lot of universities. And GRE, it is being phased out of a lot of universities because time and again people have shown that success in GRE does not translate to success in PhD. It's if you ask me personally, it's a completely wasteful process. So, and I'm glad that a lot of universities in the US especially are now saying that GRE is not required, but it's still there in some universities. So it's always a better thing to look at what the specific program requires. And volunteer jobs. If you volunteered for any sort of jobs in your undergrads or your masters, it really doesn't matter if that is let's say if you when you submit your CV, it's if 90% of it is volunteer job, saying that you volunteer for line transit, you volunteer for that surveying or this surveying. If that is all you did for your entire if that is all your research experiences, then it really does not matter because volunteers are not considered that great skills to build your own set of skill sets. So it's really important that you get some sort of a pay, not a paid internship, but some sort of an official internship or some sort of an internship with institutes or universities where you can actually say that I did work on this specific thing and I developed this skill, and there is this person who is an official in the university or research institution who can attest to that. So because volunteers are something where you can have tons of volunteers. For example, let's consider line transit. You can have volunteers who are in the 10th standard. You have volunteers who are who are software engineers. You have volunteers who are just photographers and nothing else. So yeah, it's like volunteer jobs are good to have, but not if it's the entirety of your application. And irrelevant experience. If most of your CV is irrelevant to what you're applying to, it really does not matter. If you have substantial relevant experience and then you have some other, additional curricular activities that you have done, that stands out, because then this person has a lot of, relevant experience, and he also does a lot more things. So to give my own example, I mean, I'm an NCC cadet, and and that was on my CV, but along with a lot of research experience. I have also, I do a lot of photography, but that is not my main experience. That's my co-curricular, or it goes on to the irrelevant experience part of my CV. So have substantial relevant experience first, and then include your relevant, your other experiences on your CV. So do not pay too much attention to your GPA. Make sure that you just pass the cutoff. Do not pay too much attention to your GRE. And if I would definitely recommend, if I were you, to apply to universities where GRE is no longer required. And I'll tell you why in the next few slides. And do not concentrate too much on volunteer jobs, and do not concentrate too much on irrelevant experiences. So now that is done, I mean, I'm going to just run through in a very brief point about what are the checkpoints in your PhD when you're doing a PhD in the US. First thing is you have a qualifying exam in your first year. Then you have your research proposal or a comprehensive exam, or two separate things in your second year and third year. Or you can, it depends on the university. My university has a research proposal in the second year and a comprehensive exam in the third year. And then you have your thesis submission and your defense in the fifth year. So this is what your checkpoints in your PhD is. If you fail any of these, you can be dropped out of the PhD program, at any point in time. So it's really important you have these things in mind, and you have to clear these points in your PhD for sure. And what is the cost of doing a PhD in the US? Because that's something that is expensive for us, because when everything gets converted to dollars, it really hurts our pockets. So first thing, GRE is $200. So if you are applying to universities where GRE is not, needed, it's a great thing, because then you save $200 right away. Then you have to do TOEFL or IELTS, because they have to check your English proficiency. So that there goes $200. And your application fees is like, somewhere between $50 to $150 for each application that you do. So do not go berserk about applying to 50 different universities. Pick 5 or 7, or I picked 3 universities. And I applied to just 3 universities. So pick a subset of specific universities that you want to apply to, and just apply for those. Do not waste too much money applying to a lot of universities. And your visa fees is $200, and your service fee, which basically means that this is an immigration record which the Department of Homeland Security has, and to process that application, you need to pay $200. And your flight ticket to actually come to the US could be somewhere between $800 to $1,000. And this is what you technically pay out of your pocket to start your PhD. So this could be somewhere between $1,600 to $2,500, depending upon individual preferences. And then you also have to show proof of financial means. Basically, you do not have to spend this, but you have to show this on your bank account, saying that in case I need to survive on my own, I have this amount of money in my in my bank account, and this usually is stated on your offer letter, where they say you need to show this amount of financial proof, and if you show it on your bank account, it's fine. And once you board your flight to the US, you can take it away from your bank account. So this is just a formality thing. So how do you choose the right PhD program? University does not matter. I mean, it really does not matter where you get your from. Again, it really does not matter where you get your PhD from, because a lot of people do the mistake of applying to prestigious universities or Ivy League universities, thinking that if you do a PhD from there, that is what matters. It really does not matter where you do your PhD from. What matters the most is who you are doing your PhD under. Your advisor can make or break your career in your, in academia or any other related field. So make sure that you choose the right advisor, and where you do your PhD should not even be on the list of things that you think about. And it's really important to choose an advisor who is also kind and empathetic, and not just an academic genius. I'll tell you why in the next slide. And it's also really important to choose an advisor whose style of mentoring matches your work, because there can be advisors who are micromanagers, and if you do not like someone micromanaging your work, you will have just conflicts throughout the 5 years. And you should, if you're someone who likes a hands-off experience, where the advisor just lets you do your thing and just checks in on you once a while, choose an advisor who is like that. you're choosing your life partner, because it is your professional life which is dependent on your advisor. So make sure that you choose your advisor wisely, and choose a lab where your academic siblings or cohort are supportive, and not someone where you go into a lab which is just cutthroat competitive and they just try to kill each other to get the better of each other. So do not choose a lab which is like that, and choose a place where you see yourself living for 5 or 7 years. For example, you can, I mean, any Indian for that matter will not imagine himself living in rural South USA, because it's just impossible. You will not adjust yourself to the food. The culture is so different, and people are mostly racist. So yeah, it's like you might not see yourself living in places like that. So make sure that you kind of choose a place where you see yourself living for 5 or 7 years. If you are someone who does not like cold environment, do not go to the northern borders. It makes no sense. Apply it for places in the south where it's much more similar to what South Indian climate is. And what are some of the things that you will face throughout your PhD? First is imposter syndrome. It is something that you will start facing when you start applying for your PhD, and it will probably go on for the rest of your life. It's something where you always feel that you're not good enough, but this is just a syndrome. This is not true. If you're in a PhD program, that means you are good enough to get into it. And this is something that is affecting your mental health. So imposter syndrome is something that everyone goes through. Even I go through it most of the time, and anyone who's doing a PhD here goes through. So it's not something unique. So this is something that you face all the time, and you need to have ways in which you handle this. And a lot of people face mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. And if you ask me, people who do their PhD have higher rates of anxiety and depression compared to the general population. And you also face physical health issues, because once you move on to this into a new country, getting adjusted to it can actually have a toll on your physical health as well. And social isolation, because you're in a new country, you have nothing to move around, and you don't know anyone. And one of the downfalls of PhD is that a non-existent work-life balance. You have people who work like 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day for 7 days, and their whole 5 years is just doing PhD, where they just spend their time in the lab under a microscope or in front of a computer or in front of a PCR machine. And that is not good, because if you do not have a work-life balance, nothing in this world is more important than having a good work life balance. You need to live your life and also work. Your work should not be your entire life. So, and this is something which is a problem in India, because a lot of PhD programs in India say that, oh, they pride themselves on not having a work life balance. So do not do that. Have a good work life balance. And once you come in here, you could face financial issues for a lot of reasons. So that's something that you also need to keep in mind about. Separation issues, you leave your country, you leave your family, you leave everything that you care and love for, and you come into a new country, and that can happen. I faced separation issues, and it was not from because it was not related to people or anything. I faced separation issues because in the US you have such less diversity. I see insects for like 3 months a year. For the first year, I saw very little insects, and I was very depressed, because the only thing that mattered to me when I was in India was looking at butterflies, looking at being out in the field, just observing nature. And that's something I could not do here for the first year, and that caused a lot of separation issues. So separation issues does not have to be just with personal relationships. It can be with something that you're used to do in India. And for me, getting over that was something of a hard thing, because 3 out of 4 days, 3 out of 7 days in a week, I used to spend time in nature just observing butterflies. So yeah. And cultural shock, where you see everything that is different, and people don't understand what you are, your life has been, and you have to just get adjusted to something that's happening here, and very quickly within a short, matter of months. For example, I still don't know how to read street signs, or I wouldn't say street, like how they talk about addresses here. I still can't. It's been 2 years something, and I still can't read them. It's because something that I'm not used to at all. And US has this very irritating thing about using everything in miles and yards and things, which makes no sense, but it's something that you need to get used to. And racism and alienation in the US. This is something I'm pretty sure all of you are saying. It is very prevalent. I've faced tons of racism in the US, and it's not going to go on, especially since I'm in the South, where I live in a state which was one of the original 13 colonies. That means they fought to keep slaves as legals. So yeah, it's like you face a lot of racism and alienation in the US, and especially because of Trump, you will have to expect it. And your uncertainty about the future because of political policies. For example, one day, this happened a month ago where Trump said all people with F1 visas who have online classes should just leave the country. So it's like all of these uncertainty is there, and there's a thing where they say you can go to the where they say okay fine you can go to your country but you cannot come back. So a lot of these things happen. So you need to these are issues that you face, but if you have a strong support system, if you have a normal work-life balance, and if you have a social life, you can actually address these issues very well. So given all of the negative things that I just said, or at least I wouldn't say negative. These are all realistic things that everyone goes through, and everyone who's doing a PhD will agree to this. Is it still worth it? For sure it is worth to do a PhD, because if you imagine there are 6.5 billion people in the world, and only 2 or 3% of the world's population actually has a PhD and are actually contributing to the increase in our knowledge. And it's incredibly rewarding. For example, I've been running an analysis for the last 2.5 months, and only last night at 1 a.m. is when it worked. I just could not sleep the entire night because I was so happy about it. It's incredibly rewarding at the end of it. No matter how hard or taxing it is, it's incredibly rewarding. And when you go through the process of a PhD, it's very humbling, and you develop a different perspective on life. It's something that I think you see the world in a different way. And it is mentally challenging, but it's also very mentally stimulating. It can, like I said, it can keep you awake for days, and you do not feel tired because you were awake the whole night. I've been awake for the last 26 or 27 hours, and I'm pretty sure once I'm done with this presentation, I'll go to the lab and start working. So it is, you get this new energy which you will not get otherwise. It's just, it's something that only a PhD can do to you. And there are a lot of careers which specifically require a PhD, so it is definitely worth doing a PhD. And by the end of it, you will be a good writer. If you are in the US and doing a PhD, they definitely get, or improve your writing skills. So it's definitely important, to develop those skills, and you will be a writer by the end of it. So yeah, that is what it is as an overview of how it is to do a PhD and what it is to do a PhD in the US. I'm not sure if I ran a bit over time, but yeah. So if you have any questions, or if there's no time for questions, you can shoot me a question about anything and I'll be happy to answer it.
So thank you, Nitin. Ryan will take over.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. Now we'll open up the panel for some questions for Mr. Nitin. As of now, we don't have any questions yet on YouTube. So all the participants from MS Teams who have questions, please unmute your mic and address the speaker.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are basically two questions. One is, in many universities, it is said that you teach in the university as the assistant professor, and then they give the compensatory bench fees that otherwise one have to pay in the lab or the university. So for the external supports like living, fooding, and etc., does the university directly help with the scholarship, or the individual has to apply for the scholarship in the different agencies, not agencies, but different government policies or something?
So so to answer that question, firstly, as a international student, you cannot apply to any of the government scholarships or funding here, because that is specifically reserved to people in the US. And secondly, let's say PhD in the US is more of like a job than actually a student kind of a life. For example, when you apply for a PhD, they say they tell you that you are basically paid a salary. For example, you're paid like $25,000 to $30,000 a year, and as a single person, and if you do not have a family or something, then you can easily survive for with your housing, boarding, and everything. You can survive for the entire year. So all PhD positions are paid. You're either paid as a teaching assistant where you teach for the university, or you're paid as a research assistant for doing your research. So you do not, basically, most internet, I would say 95 or 99% of the international students do not apply to any sort of external funding. They might apply to specific grants for specific projects, but for your salaries, the universities take care of it, or your lab takes care of it. When you, for example, when you enter a PhD program, they'll say, we will offer you this stipend for, the fall semester, this much stipend for the summer semester, and this much for the spring semester, and this is what you'll be paid for your services for the university or the lab. And that, if you ask me, I mean, as Indians, I would say, whatever they do pay, it is, you can lead a comfortable life. I mean, you can lead a really comfortable life.
Thank you, sir. And the second question is about that in India, ICSE board or CISE board is the only board where it is accepted globally for because it follows the syllabus of Cambridge pattern, keeping English in the first language position. So, is it a compensatory exam for TOEFL or IELTS, or is the TOEFL compulsory?
It is compulsory. I mean, like I said, it really does not matter what what your school was or what your undergraduate education was. I mean, for example, we are taught English from even before we learn our own mother tongue, in schools. But even then, it does not matter because you have to take TOEFL because you are considered a non-native English speaker. So only countries where your native language is English is where TOEFL is not required. If you have learned English as a second language or as a non-native language, you have to give TOEFL or IELTS. It does not matter.
Thank you, sir.
This is a question from one of the participants on YouTube. He wants a little bit more elaboration on why it's better to do a PhD abroad rather than in India.
So honestly speaking, it really doesn't matter where you do your PhD. I mean, especially PhD scene in India right now is excellent. It's getting so much better. But it is dependent on government policies because governments everywhere are cutting funding on research. So it is. I mean, if you ask me, it all depends on who you do your PhD under. It does not matter where it is in the world. So, for example, if you're doing your PhD in NCBS or ICES or IITs or the NIS, one of these national institutes or CCMB or I do not know all the institutes in India. I mean, NCBS, ISC, ICES are the top which comes to my mind. I mean, doing PhD here is equivalent to doing PhD anywhere in the world. And that follow-up question again that I asked myself, why do I want to go outside for my PhD was because by the end of my master's and the 2 years that I took a break after that working as a research assistant, I realized that I wanted to work on a very specific thing for my PhD, and there was no one working in India on that, and there was not many people working on that in Australia or New Zealand or anywhere else in the world. It was mostly concentrated in the US, and that was literally the only decision that made me choose US over any other country. And also, I had worked in a lab in NCBS for 5 years, and I realized that I had gotten whatever experience I could get out of that, being there. So that was the reason I chose to do my PhD in the US. Otherwise, I would not even have thought about doing my PhD in the US. If there were people working on specific things that I was interested in, I would have totally done it in India itself. Because being close to family, being close to everything that you've grown up with is, has its own, it is a lot less pressure on you. So if you're thinking about doing where to do your PhD, think about it. Okay, is this something specific that I want to work with? And if that is, if you've identified that, then apply to those places or countries where you think they are doing that research. So if someone says that, research in India is bad, then it is just, got swallowed. It's not true at all. Research in India is on par with what research abroad is. But again, it depends on where and who you do it under. If you're doing it under some private college where where research is not done or research is not a priority, then you might not get too much out of it. But if you're doing it in any of these national institutes or any other university labs where that professor has done a lot. For example, Himender Bharati, who is in I think Punjab University, it's a state university. He is world renowned for his work on ants and evolution. So you could always it's like it doesn't really matter where the person is. It all matters is who you do your PhD under. That is what matters the most.
Vasudevan Mani from YouTube again asks, how do you research on selecting good advisors for your PhD programs, and if you could give any sources?
Yeah. So, given yeah, talking about this for for a person, for a citizen in the US versus a citizen in India is different. For example, I am also mentoring undergrads to apply for PhD. So when I give this advice to them, it's kind of different. So I'll try to see if I can say it specifically to Indians. So as as an international student, you are kind of, you do not have the same freedom as what what a person in the US or a US citizen is applying has. But this is something that I would kind of advise if you want to choose the right advisor. First thing, read about that advisor's work. So if you go to, let's say, if you do not even know how to choose an advisor to begin with, you don't even know what who you want to work with. So first thing I would say, identify a research area that you think you're interested in. Let's say you want to work on cancer, because that's something that a lot of Indian students do apply to. So you are interested in work researching on cancer. Then you start you know using Google Scholar. Use Google Scholar. Do not just use Google. Use Google Scholar, because that's where you see research papers. That's where you see professors and PIs actually listed. So you use Google Scholar. You read about papers where they talk about cancer research, and then you basically read a lot. And once you start reading a lot, you kind of identify. You kind of start making a list of people who you think are good, who you think whose work you like, and then start contacting them. And once you contact them, if they reply to you, then you have that you have that first initial Skype interview. So in that Skype interview, it's not just the person who's interviewing you, you're also interviewing that person to make sure that that advisor kind of fits in. So ask the right questions to that advisor, saying, I asked my advisor what her mentoring philosophy was, how she treated grad students, what the work life balance was in her lab, how many students she had who graduated successfully, how many students she had who dropped out of the PhD program midway. So all of these hard questions, if I mean, you need to ask these questions straight up so that you know what you are getting into. And once you're done talking to that advisor, then you can make a decision. Okay, fine, is does this advisor kind of fill in my check boxes as to acceptable or not acceptable? And the final thing is, email her or his current students, because the advisor might project a different thing, but the students might say a different thing. So email not just one. If there are 10 people in the lab, at least email to 5 or 6 people asking the same questions that you asked the advisor, or even more detailed, saying that how is this advisor? Does this advisor give you breaks, or does this advisor treat you fairly, or does this advisor make you work like a slave, or whatever questions you feel like. And I did that. And once you get all of these replies and everything, and if you're satisfied with it, you should apply for it. So the only way to get a good advisor is to read a lot. If you do not know who you want to work with to begin with, identify people, write to them, talk to their labs. And if there is someone in your university who kind of knows that person, saying that, oh, I know this person who who's done this research, you can ask, how is this person as an advisor? Because a lot of great scientists are very crappy advisors. They are very bad at advising students, because they care only about research and they're rarely there for their students. So that's why I said, it's like you need to talk to the lab members, talk to the advisor and everything. So if once you kind of go through this process, you will be able to fairly identify a good advisor.
Thank you, sir. So with that, I think we'll end the Q&A session and move on to the vote of thanks. So once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Rayan Demel from the National Science Association at St. Joseph's College. I shall be giving the vote of thanks for Mr. Nitin on behalf of the National Science Association, Department of Zoology, for which I am very privileged to be doing. For a lot of us, deciding whether to go abroad or stay in India to pursue our different careers or ways of life can be a big, blind, unsteady step. Mr. Nitin was able to give us information and clarity needed and made us all a little more reassured in the directions we can head in the future. We are very glad to have had you with us, sir. Your time with us has been invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to call upon Dr. Jayashankar to finalize the program. Thank you.
That's the final vote of thanks. It started well in the morning, the international webinar on studying abroad and career prospects for life science students. We were very lucky that we got 5 of our own alumni students, ex-Josephites, pursuing their higher studies in different parts of the world to be the resource persons for this webinar. I must first thank them for their valuable time, and most of them or all of them in a very short notice. So thank you all the five resource persons right from morning: Santosh, Avinash, Chirag, Aditya, and Nitin, all scholars in their own field. Thank you for your time and the guidance that you have provided to students through this platform. This webinar could not have been possible without the encouragement and support of the management of St. Joseph's College. I would like to place on record thanks to our rector, Reverend Father Phd De Silva, the principal, Reverend Father Victor Lobo, and also the Department of Zoology, which has the Natural Science Association. The head of the department, Professor Thomas, for his continued support in helping NSA to organize these webinars, and all the faculty members of the Department of Zoology for their coordinated support and guidance in running all these webinars conducted by the Natural Science Association. This would not happen without the volunteers of the Natural Science Association, both of the previous batch who stood by and the new committee that is being formed of this academic year of 2021. They have taken over everything. Everything is done by them, start to end, in finalizing the program, in forming the registration forms, the feedback, certificate, setting up the meeting, everything. As coordinator, I only oversee them, that it moves in a smooth ride. I should also thank especially Soumya and Anukriti, Alan and Abhijit and other seniors who have guided their juniors in this NSA committee to run all these webinars successfully. This one, fourth in line in this pandemic situation. The first was on zoonosis and wildlife trafficking, the second on moths, the third on tiger, and then now it's on career prospects. Everything has been a great successful, and it's successful because there are good participants participating from different parts of the world as well as different states, different universities within the country. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. If anybody is interested in your in contacting the resource persons, when the feedback reaches you, you can also write to us. Then we can specify and guide you or connect you to the resource persons. With that, we end this one-day international webinar on studying abroad and career prospects for life science students. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Shankar,
Yes, sir.
you forgot my request. Aditya and Nitin, Aditya shared his email ID. Nitin and Chirag forgot, I think. Let the students get benefited by sending mails to them if required.
Yeah, share my email ID right now. I mean, is my screen visible now?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just add it in a new slide. Yeah, this is my personal email ID. This is my official email ID, which I check more than my personal email ID. But overall, I check email only if it's urgent. If it's otherwise, I usually procrastinate and postpone my email. So if you ever email me and if I do not reply to your email, just WhatsApp message me, because that is literally the fastest way to contact me, because I'm on WhatsApp most of the time. So yeah, so this is my contact information. And if you have any questions about applying or selecting advisors, or going through the process of applying for a PhD in the US or India, you can always contact me. I really love helping students, because without seniors and other people helping me, I would not have been here. So feel free to contact me anytime. Yeah, just be aware that there might be a little lag, because I usually procrastinate about replying. So yeah.
Thank you, Nitin. Chirag, is Chirag around? I don't think Chirag. Jayashankar, is Chirag around?
We'll just check, sir. That's why I'm
I
checking.
don't think he is around in the participants column. I don't.
No, he's not there, sir. That's what I said. If the participants write to us,
Yeah,
then
yeah, okay.
we share it along with the, because the feedback forms have to go. So with that, we can.
Yeah. Dear participants, I would like to congratulate Dr. Jaishankar for his wonderful work done for the last 1.5 months in organizing most of the webinars. As you all know, he is such a wonderful guy, and I'm really proud of him to have him as my colleague. Thank you.
Your student also was your student.
No, now I have to consider you as my teacher also.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, all the participants. We'll end the meeting now. Good evening, good night, whatever it is abroad.